Hello everyone, I'm Tanay from Junior Programmer and welcome back to another YouTube video. So as you can see in this video we'll create a photo editor. So as you can see it will have the basic functions just like some basic photo editors you can find online, like the basic adjustments, brightness, contrast, saturation, grayscale, sepia hue, invert, opacity, blur feature too. And there will also be some advanced features such as the transformations that you can see. It can transform on X and Y, move it along and skew the image, as well as you can add the gradients over an image. You can simply add the image from a URL and you can edit it. So let's move on to the code. So we'll simply start with the file. Just start with the basic tags, for example the talk type tag, the head tag, within that the links to the style sheet and all that. This is just the basic HTML stuff. Now moving on, we'll create the search bar for the image. So this is for the toolbar that is at the top, where you will add the image and can toggle the image and add a new image to this editor. So as you can see, I have just written some input tags, the image tag, and using some divs and buttons. I'll just make the buttons that will then style afterwards in the CSS. So these buttons are like the reset all button, show original, drop downs, and these kind of buttons, just some basic buttons. These do not have to do anything with the editing, rather they are they're just for the opening and closing of the files. So as you can see now, I will just copy paste this divs because these are all the same things. For example, there are arrows, points, chevron, trapezoid, parallelogram, these kind of things. So these are just the same, so I'll just copy and paste. You can also copy and paste, and I'm just changing the values in the polygon, so the polygon is different. So like that again. I've also defined some functions. For example, on click is equals to toggle shapes. So this is the function that I'll be writing afterwards in the JavaScript file. So keep on watching the video till the end and we'll get to this function later on where I'll explain the function. So for now I'm just making the polygons, different polygons of different sizes. As you can see, I'm just changing the sizes, the percentages of the polygons, and it will create different polygons. So this is now the end of the search bar, the top search bar for the image loading and all this kind of stuff. So let's move on to the image editing part. So first of all, I'll create the buttons and inputs and the divs for the basic adjustment buttons that were on the top right corner. So here, as you can see, I'm just creating the buttons. For example, I'm creating a div, then I'm creating an input, which is kind of a range, where you can define a range for the particular value, for example the brightness, contrast, saturation, grayscale, sepia, and all that. And simply I'll repeat this for the transform. So we have to take an input because the input is used to take a value from the user. So the input is of type slider. We denote it by the type range in the HTML code. So like the previous one, for the basic transformations I've done for the transformations. So this is just for the skewness, moving of the image, and all that you have seen in the start. So similarly, using the same two tags, the div and the input tags, and the same class, the same type of the input, I'll also be creating the gradients, but the gradients will be a little different for the colors. As you can see, the type is text and in a couple of them, and the type is also range. So this is because the colors will not only be based on the range, but they will also be based on the hex code colors that you can say hex code you can get from Google. So this is for that, a little bit of change. And now we will move on to the mix blend mode. So again, simply I'm just creating a div, its type as input, and also as you can see I'm also giving them all of them a different kind of class. For example, for the mix blend ones, I'm giving a class of mix blend mode, so it is easy for me afterwards to style it in the in the CSS sheet. So for the previous different divs, I've also given different kind of classes, as you can see, as you'll see in the video, in the code, so that I can use these classes to style these particular elements afterwards. So now let's move on to the text input. So this is for writing a text onto an image. So similarly, we'll have some inputs of type text and some buttons so that the person can submit the button, add the text, toggle the text, and all this kind of thing. So this is just so all the text in the HTML, you have to keep in mind, is not like creating a functionality. It is just like creating a canvas, and on a canvas you're drawing the things. So we're using different divs, the type of inputs, different types of inputs are there. For example, text, the slider, the range. So these are all used side by side to create different kind of buttons and all that. So as you can see, there's a lot of kind of detail in the code. So you can see the code afterwards from the link that I'll be giving below. And then you can change the values and so on and see how it affects it. So it will not like change a lot. It will only affect the size and shape of the button and so on. So now I'm adding the fonts. So here there are different kind of options for the fonts that I'm giving. I'm just copy pasting and changing the fonts. So these are like the fonts that will be available on the editor. And now the border and the background color. So again we are giving the sliders and taking an input because anything that we have to get from user has to be in the input tag, and then we can give it a type. For example, if it's a text, or if it's a value, or if it's a range, or if it's a radio button, and like that. Now border styles. So as you can see from the start till now, I'm just writing the code and just writing on the canvas like this button is of this much width and height and all that, and just writing this for all of the different sections. So now we are done with the border styling. As you can see, we have different we are trying to give different kind of styles. So I'll just copy and paste the code again, and we'll simply change the values. So these are different border styles. For example, no border, solid border, double, dashed, grouped, and all different kind of border styles. So now after that we have created the divs and all that for the editing options. Now we have to create for the editor image area. So this is where the image will be placed. So as you can see, I'm making use of divs and figures. So figures are like to display the figures and images, just to make this. So now after we are done with the HTML file, we'll move on to the CSS file. So here I'm just importing the fonts. As you can see, just a little import. So CSS is important to this project because we do all the styling here. So let's start. So first of all, I'm declaring some image variables. I'm declaring the variables because I'll have to change the values constantly based on what user defines the value. For example, when the slider moves, the value of blur can move from 1 pixel to 2 to 3 to 4. So these are the variables, just like in any other language, and then when we change the value of these variables, it will reflect in the output. So I'm just creating all the options, all the options that we have. I'm creating the variables for all of them and giving them an initial value. So initially there will be just like in between, and then we can change and the values will change. So similarly I'm doing for text variables. For example, the color of the text, the font, the shadows and all that. So after this we'll now have to go to the styling. So we'll start with the body, and the body, the first main tag. So we move from outer tags to the inward tags, so it is easy to keep track of. So now with the header, the top div, the right div. So as you can see, these are not like much complex styling, just some padding, the background colors, borders, and all this kind of stuff that we have been doing in previous videos. So this is just like some basic styling, and you can get like what you're styling by the name of the variable. For example, the color, text align, max height, max width, and all this kind of stuff. So as you can see here in the clip path, we are doing variable. So for all these kind of things where we have to use the variable, we have to just specify the variable, and then within the brackets we are using the value of that variable. So whatever the value changes will be also changed in the styling, and then it will be reflected into the output. So now we have to like keep on moving and style all the divs that we have written in the HTML file. So like this, similarly we're doing for the text areas, text area 2. Here I'm also making use of the variables that we have defined before. Now moving on to the main image area. So for the background, again, as you can see throughout this CSS file, we have used the variables that we had to define in the start. This is because again the values change and we want to like show them on the screen as soon as they changes. So there are some variables, for example the max width, max height and all this, these are kind of static because they won't change, because the frame of the editor won't change, but the things that change are in the variables. So this should like make sense of how a photo editor works. So as we move on, we'll just like keep on styling all the divs, like overlay before and after the different classes. For example, overlay 2 after and overlay 2 before. So since both of them are just the same style, we're doing them into one of them. So I just want to say that if you think that this CSS looks complex, it is not complex. It is just that we're making use of a new concept, that is the variable. So if you like look at the code afterwards, you'll pretty much see like it is a simple thing and nothing much complex is happening here. We're just using the same concept that we have been doing before, that is styling the output and using the fonts and all this kind of stuff. And this one more new concept has been introduced, that is for the variables, and that is like not too much complex. So for the initial start, you can just copy paste the same code or download it from the link in the GitHub repository and can just use it, and then you can make tweaks and change the values a bit, and then you can see that how each and everything changes the code, and then you can understand it better. So this is an advice that I can give you. So as you can see, for now we have reached till the text part, and the text part is done, and now we'll be moving on to the sliders and the text box styling. So for the stylers, we have to do the styling for the text on off, for the input, for the labels. So again, as you can see, the actual styling that we are doing, that is not too much like difficult things. For example, it is simply the width, the height, the border, the background color, the appearance. So just the basic stuff, and you can like tell from the name what we are styling. So from the input, if the type is of range, like if it is a styler, then we have this kind of styling. And if the input type is of text, for example when the user has to enter some text onto the image, this is the kind. And then the radio divs, input box. So when I write with the dot and then the name of the div, it is for the class, and then when I use the hash, it is not a class. Okay. Now for the button, it is focused. Now for the button, when it is not focused, just the whole button, just the styling when the button is hovered, the controls, the search box. So as you can see, we are just using all the divs that we had created in the HTML, and we're just using it to style like different elements, each and every button. So as you can see, this is the importance of the divs and the CSS, like how much it is important and how much functionality does it give to style the output. So now we are done with the CSS file, and now moving on to the JavaScript file. So JavaScript file will have the functionality and will make it like more interactive. So first of all, I'm just selecting all the elements and using them with the JavaScript file. So I'll have to select the elements within the JavaScript file, the elements in the HTML file, so that I can access them from the JavaScript file and can make changes to them. So I'm just using them, like I'm just accessing them using the selectors, their IDs and their classes. Just the same concept that we have been using with the CSS, but this time around we'll use it for the JavaScript. So creating the event listeners. So the event listeners, like when mouse clicks on something, when mouse moves, then these kind of things. And we are also applying the changes like mix blend modes, border styles, text styles, shapes. So we're saying that when mouse clicks, use this function, and after here we'll define the functions. So first of all, for the sliders, when the sliders value change, whenever the sliders value change, we are like getting the kind, like for example the blur. We're first seeing like, okay, the value is changing of the blur, and then we are updating the value into the CSS, and then that reflects on the output. Similarly, we are doing for the change text style, for the border styles, for the mix blend mode. So whatever the element we click on, it will first check, okay, this is the element that has been clicked on. For example, we are clicking on the brightness, so when we click on its slider, it will first get, okay, this is the slider, and then we'll change it. So after that, we'll have to use the functionality for some buttons. For example, the show original button, toggle mirror button. So for the mirror, we're just simply using the scale of -1, so the image seems to be like mirrored. And then for the flip, we'll like mirror it along the y-axis, while for the reflection along the x-axis. And then we are doing for the toggle shapes, so it is like a drop-down shapes, and we're just simply writing simple code, if and else statement. For example, if this thing is clicked, do this, if not, then do the other thing. For example, if show original is clicked, show the original, if not, then do not. And now moving on to the text part of the of the editor, just some simple styling, as you can see, taking the inner HTML then styling it. And now removing the last text. So we're just simply using the loops and all this kind of stuff. This is just some simple coding stuff that we can use and get the text on and off, change the image size, and make the functionality of the buttons work. So similarly, we're doing for the full size close, the source, so it will like get the source of the images that we have to edit, and then we can open it. And now reset the overlay gradients to none. So after we are done, we can just reset the gradients to none, so they're on their original values. And if someone wants to revert the changes, they can simply press this button. Similarly, we are doing for the reset blend mode, and then reset all the sliders. So if someone makes some changes and does not want to do it, or he uploads a new video and there are some changes before, and he can just simply reset, and everything will go back to the default, and he can start all over again. So finally, the color picker, this is for like different colors for the gradients. We'll just simply define a function that will allow the user to select a color, and then the value of the color will be shown on the output. So after that, we'll now move on to the output. So as you can see, there's the image. As we move the basic adjustments, we can control the different elements of an image. For example, the brightness, contrast, saturation, grayscale, hue, as you can see, the hue, the invert, the blur. It is like pretty much clear how much the blur affects, so the user can like simply change the values and can see. So this is like not a much simple editor, this is like much an advanced editor, and the code that I showed you just makes it simple, like how you can create such a editor, and you can use it, for example, in different web app of yours, or create your own web app, and can just make the changes in the code to like include more functionality or decrease any of the functionality. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and you learned a lot. So for any other ideas of the videos, you can simply you can simply comment down and I'll surely go through there. And for the next time, I hope to see you all back. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and give a like to my video so that it shows your support and I keep on making more videos. Until next time, goodbye.